I assume you can see why Biden might have implemented the vaccine policy in the first place. I think your question is, why didn't they modify it, alter it later,
you
right?
keep invoking Biden as if he is playing an important role in decision making.
Well, the administration, okay? Somebody implemented the policy.
I don't want you skipping ahead like that, because the fact that you and I sitting here, I, a lifelong Democrat, you as somebody who says that you have in general voted Democrat, that you and I don't exactly know what's president because the guy who sits in the office is obviously at the end of his cognitive life. That's a problem. That means something is president outside of our constitutional structure. And somehow you're okay with this? You're invoking Biden as if he's president. You and I both know there's something wrong.
Brett, I revised the question immediately and said, do you agree that the Biden administration's decision, which surely you would accept as a characterization of orders that come down from the Biden administration, right? Is that okay? Can I talk like that?
Well, look, you can talk however you want, but I want you don't.
You just keep changing the subject.
No,
I have been as critical. If you did listen to my podcast, you'd know that virtually every week I say we got to get this guy off the ticket. He's not all there cognitively. We agree on that.
Okay, good. But then, Robert, why can we not hear each other? Okay, something is very seriously wrong in this country if we have a president who is not all cognitively there. And yet we're going to skip right into the next sentence and say, well, then the administration. What is the administration? What administration would allow a senile old man to inhabit that office with that kind of power? And not look, I've said on my podcast that Kamala Harris, as much as I detest her, should be president tomorrow.
That would not fill me with hope and joy, but whatever.
It would make me very upset, but at least it would make sense. At least there's somebody you can make a phone call to and you can say, Kamala, here are the nuclear stakes. Here's what they mean.
Can I get back to the alternative theories to explain what you see as intentional degradation of our military?
Presumably they are hypotheses, but go ahead.
They are hypotheses. You're correct. I was using the term theory colloquially. So, first of all, the only reason I used the word Biden, sorry about that, was I meant that it seems to me not hard to explain why someone who was in charge of executive branch policy, whoever that may be, would have instituted the vaccine back when they did. After all, unlike you, I think they're fans of the vaccine. They think, it works, and they were certainly thinking that, and they wanted to bring the pandemic under control as soon as possible. And so one reason you would do it is say, well, the military, that's a place we can order it. We know that we can. We have that power. We don't want to go that far as civilians, but we can at least start there. That might be one reason. There might be plenty. But in any event, I assume that the main question you're asking is, once they saw what you see as the very damaging, devastating fallout of this policy, why didn't they change it? That's what I have hypotheses about, okay? One.
Okay. Can I pause you there? I want to hear them, but let's just notice a couple things. The people, so I accept as a plausible hypothesis that the people who made the decision believed that the so-called vaccines were an important component in controlling the pandemic. I once believed that that was likely too. There comes a point at which you can no longer believe that because you know that they are not effective at controlling contraction or transmission of the disease. And you also know that to the extent that they might be effective at anything at all, they are extremely age stratified for risk. Now, at the point that you have made a bad decision in your hypothetical world for honorable reasons, and then you have come to understand that they are not a useful tool in controlling the spread of the disease, that this is a population that needs them far less than the public, and that this is having consequences for things like readiness, you do alter the policy. And if what they had done was said, well, it turns out that instead of lying, which is what we've gotten so far, that, we never said it controlled transmission. Well, bullshit. It's on video all over the place. They said it repeatedly. Okay. If what they had done is owned up to it and said, look, this was a fast moving situation. We made the best call we could on the basis of the information we had. As the information that we had changed, it suggested a different policy, which is why we've lifted the mandates. Had they done that, I wouldn't have had a podcast. That's not what they did. They still haven't done it. In fact, they are doubling down on this, and they are doubling down on ignoring the risk stratification. It's not just the military. It's now children. Something has gotten into our system that is making the opposite of sense.
Let me say, I think when it became evident on Twitter that you and I were going to have this debate/discussion, some people got excited and like, okay, you're really going to, you got to lay down the law to Bret about ivermectin and vaccines. And like, I'm not here to debate ivermectin and vaccines. I don't spend nearly as time thinking about that stuff as you do. So that's not going to happen. Now, after I lay out these hypotheses, if you would like me to explain why I quit thinking of you as a credible source on this information, I'd be happy to, because I remember the moment and I remember the podcast. I'd be happy to talk about that. But I'm not here to debate. I'm not up on the latest stuff. And by the way, I was, open-minded. I think it was on the Decoding the Gurus podcast that I said, I think we were talking about you specifically. I said, I think the jury's still out on ivermectin. I've seen a number of studies. Some of them seem to suggest benefits. I am really not, I try very hard not to be kind of a tribalistic thinker. Okay. But there was, I'm happy to describe the what you said that made me gravely doubt your credibility. But first, let me get through these hypotheses, okay? So if the question is, and by the way, you seem to be ruling out a lot of hypotheses. I mean, you say things like in this podcast, the absolute least pernicious explanation is total indifference to the well-being of service members and the readiness of our military force. That's the least bad it could be. I would say that assumes they share your view of all the stuff we've described, which is the magnitude of the fallout, the benefits of the vaccine, and so on. I wouldn't assume that. But that aside, let me mention some hypotheses, okay? Why wouldn't they not change a policy? A, bureaucratic inertia. The military is a famously irrational institution. I was brought up in a military family. My father was a career Army officer. It has been a running joke for a long time how irrational the military is. Like, why are we following this rule? Well, the base commander 10 years ago implemented it, and it wasn't in anybody's particular interest. Nobody thought they could get a promotion by changing it. It's just like, the military is not some kind of lean and mean corporation constantly competing and looking at its bottom line. It is a classic bureaucratic inertia happens all the time. Now, granted, if these people at the top of this bureaucracy shared your views, then you could say, well, in not changing the policy, you are subject to certain criticisms about your indifference to military readiness or something. But I would contend they don't. If you want to contest that, fine. Let me move on to another.
You realize
point.
They have their own system completely within the military for assessing the level of harm from vaccines. And it has the same off-the-chart signal that we see in the public VAERS system. The military has a system for assessing
VAERS,
harm.
I don't want to get into a discussion about VAERS. I assume you'd agree that one thing about VAERS is that if you're going to compare data, this is the public place that people can say, I had a symptom after a vaccine. It's very hard to compare different episodes in history. And because sometimes the public becomes more alerted to the possibility of reporting things to VAERS than others. And now I would think we're at an all-time high. But I don't want to argue about VAERS.
You realize it's a crime to report things that didn't happen to VAERS, and that this question has been studied, and the majority of the reports in VAERS are from medical professionals or pharmaceutical professionals. This whole idea that this is just some free-for-all where the public is reporting things that didn't happen is nonsense. What's more, we have exactly the same pattern in the VAERS system, the European yellow card system, and the military system. The military system is completely immune to what you're talking about. And yet it shows the same pattern.
Okay, I want to get back to this question about assessing data about the vaccine, because it is in that context that I first started not thinking about you as an especially reliable source. And I'll explain what I mean. Let me quickly say, here are the other hypotheses. Okay, another one is just they don't want to admit error. Now, interestingly, on the podcast of yours with the first one with the 3 military people, one of them threw that out. And I think you missed it. But one of them said, look, if you're Joe Biden, you're not going to issue a press release saying I got that one wrong. Exactly. Even if he starts thinking he got it wrong, there's a strong incentive, and we see this in all kinds of bureaucracies, to not report it. Now, you may say, well, if he shares my view of the damage being done, he's a horrible person. Well, there are a lot of horrible politicians, but that's different from saying there's a conspiracy to undermine our military readiness. Okay, third hypothesis.
Wait. No. Let us look at that hypothesis.
Fine.
You're telling me that privately, these people have come to understand that what they believed wasn't correct and there was some risk, and that they are... No,
I'm not telling you that, but go ahead.
You're putting that as a proposal.
I'm saying if you start with your premise that they must know that this isn't working and it has downside... If you just told me that the average politician had run into a case where they realized that a policy they are identified isn't working, and asked me, are they going to admit it? I'll say probably not, unless it's a different species of politician that I'm familiar with.
Better than yours. My hypothesis, is that our system is riddled with people who are willing to peddle influence, which means willing to sell out the public. And so they're not especially interested in the truth of what these things do or don't do. My guess is we would learn something interesting if we found out how they personally behaved with respect to issues like COVID vaccinations. But with respect to the public, I don't think they're sitting around fretting about whether or not these things do or do not block transmission. I think they have higher priorities.
I actually agree. That's part of my point here. You shouldn't. A lot of your thinking assumes the opposite. They're just as aware as Brett is of how horrible these things are.
No. Look, my hypothesis requires them to be indifferent, and it requires something else to be interested in either profit making or, in the case of the thing that got me on your radar again, the question of military readiness. Yes, there are things in the world that are powerful, that have lots of monetary resource, that are not interested in us being militarily ready and would prefer that we are not. The question is, what is it that blocks them from buying influence in our pay-for-play system? Do you know?
I would say it's your hypothesis, and yet I can't get you to flesh it out and tell us. Who are these players you envision? How are they manipulating the system? And what specific policy interventions?
Okay. Just for the sake of argument.
Yeah.
What if China decided that it wanted instead of making itself more militarily ready, it decided it would be a bargain to make us less militarily ready. And it decided to buy influence and advance policies that would have that consequence without announcing themselves as sabotage. Would they be able to do it?
I would think this wouldn't be one of the first 10 things that came to their minds, first of all. They would much rather know things about our weapons systems, undermine the weapon systems, infect our communication systems. There's all kinds of things.
Bob,
Brett, this would only occur to a small number of people, what you're suggesting, because most people don't share your view.
In what universe are those things mutually exclusive?
No, but they have priorities. I mean, they can't spend their money on everything. They can't focus on everything. I'm just saying this is very unlikely to occur to them.
Influence in our system is inexpensive compared to things like building new weapon systems or investing in the covert sabotage of weapon systems. Influence in our system is cheap. Why wouldn't they buy it?
Of course they'd buy it. I'm not saying that. So let me just back up.
Wait. Did you just say that of course they buy influence in our system?
Yeah, foreign actors try to buy influence on our system. So do domestic interests that can be just as corrupting. Yes, of course.
Then why is my suggestion that this policy might be advanced to reduce military readiness in any way indicative of my failure of cognition?
Well, first of all, I've already listed a couple of alternative hypotheses that are the kinds of things we see every day. We all know they happen all the time. And so I think they're actually more parsimonious. But I want to back up and just be clear.
Not that mutually exclusive. There is no place.
But Brad,
there's no place in my entire history of public speech that I have ever said incompetence was not rampant. It is. What I've said is that it doesn't go far enough to explain some patterns, this being one of them.
Let me just quote you again. So if you were interested in keeping that party in power so that it could continue to advance bad policy, but you were also interested in degrading military readiness, then the mandates might persist and blah, blah, blah. So you're saying, is a foreign power that both wants to keep the Democrats in power, kind of mysteriously, if you look at Biden's China policy, by the way, and given the thing, some of the things he's been handing down lately, but you were also interested in degrading military readiness. So now I think a reasonable person would have thought you're talking about the Democratic Party. That's clearly the most superficially.
This is why.
But you're saying you don't mean that. You mean a foreign actor wants to do both of these things: keep the Democrats in power and undermine military readiness.
This is why I go through the formalism of calling this the blue team. Okay, the Democratic Party has a history. It has things to be proud of. I don't think the thing that is currently in power has much of a relationship with that historical entity. I mean, for one thing, notice there is essentially not a single likable person in this party anymore. Why are we stuck with Joe Biden?
I wouldn't go that far, but go ahead.
Who could they put in? Who could they advance? Who could win the presidency? Who inside the Democratic Party?
Who could beat Trump or somebody? A lot of people. The trouble is they won't nominate him.
Exactly. And the people they won't nominate are leaving.
Yeah, well, this is a common party. In a two-party system, the nomination tends to cater to the extremes, the right and left extremes, and you wind up with candidates who aren't necessarily well suited to win the general. But can I finish my list of hypotheses?
You're bending over backwards to rescue the idea that the Democratic Party is an organic entity rather than the more parsimonious hypothesis that in a completely pay-for-play system, things will take up that space and they will walk around in a suit that looks like the Democratic Party doing whatever they want for whatever reasons that they've bought access. This is.
By the way, do you deny that Republicans are also susceptible to the same kind of influence?
In fact, I believe they invented this. That's what I told you, is I think that Clinton took the Democratic Party and he muscled in on the racket that the Republican Party had innovated. And that's where we're stuck. We've now got two corrupt parties. Now, ironically, because of the role the Democratic Party is playing, you now have conservatives in the Republican Party who are actually speaking in defense of the values that made the country special. So there is life inside the Republican Party. I don't think it's universal. I still think the party is corrupt beyond rescuing. But no, I think you have two teams. And to think of this as an organic political party is a mistake at this point. It's not behaving like one. It's behaving like an influence peddling racket.
Okay, you use the term blue team, so I don't know. I don't know what you meant. Something inorganic. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just being clear. I think any person would have taken you to be meaning that the entity that both wants the Democrats to win and wants to undermine military readiness, and you are asserting there may well be such an entity, is somebody in the executive branch. That's what I thought. But now you're saying there's some kind of foreign entity that wants both. I'm clear on that. So can I?
No, I want to clean something up. Okay. I believe, as you apparently also believe, that foreign actors will have noticed that one thing they could do, should they wish to alter our course, is to buy influence in our system and steer. Okay? That is something you and I apparently both believe is likely to be happening. So the question is the magnitude of that large enough to create a policy that would, for example, cause us to degrade our own military readiness, not because it makes any sense and not because we're being bureaucratic, but because something that has bought influence wishes us not to be ready, I believe that is plausible. At least I believe it is not crazy, which is what you suggested in your tweet.
I think it is so far. I do think it's so far out there that given the number of alternative hypotheses that you don't seem to have even considered, and I haven't even gotten through my list, it suggests that you are under the influence of highly motivated reasoning.
Now, wait a second. Now, wait a second. First of all, let us be clear. What I am saying is that it is a viable hypothesis that something, or more likely multiple things that don't want us ready, are acting through the executive branch. We have left a loophole in our system, and that they have taken advantage of that loophole. And our policy doesn't make sense because it is not intended to better us. That's the hypothesis. And you seem to agree to all the components. And your complaint is that there are other things that may be in play here. And my point will then be they are insufficient to explain the level of our self-harm.
Yeah, but again, Brett, your view of the level of the self-harm is not widely shared in the administration or in most parts of America. Your podcast is this distinct thing with its own audience that is very distinctive in its orientation, and the guests you bring on tend to agree with you strongly. I'm just here to tell you, Brett, most people out there aren't sitting there thinking like, oh my God, they're giving vaccines to fighter pilots. What if they have a heart attack? Most people don't think vaccines give you heart attacks.
Most people don't think that.
Right, okay, that's my point.
Most people probably think it's not that weird that the CDC just recommended that the states put those same mRNA so-called vaccines on the regular childhood vaccine schedule.
Right. So my question is,
but what does that matter? Look,
it matters in the fall.
You are smart enough to understand that the CDC recommending that the states administer these so-called vaccines to children is not only absurd, but it is indefensible.
Like I said, I don't spend much time reading up on this stuff. I'm sorry. I'm here to discuss the military readiness issue.
Okay, then that's the problem, Robert, because let's just put it this way. This entire conversation is unnecessary if the following thing is true.
Yeah.
The age stratification of the risk of COVID and the inverse age stratification of the risk of the vaccines in and of themselves mean there is no reason in the world that we should be recommending these things for children. What's more, the fact that they don't block transmission means it's absurd on its face. This is not defensible logically, it's not defensible medically, it's not defensible epidemiologically. So there is nothing normal that could explain why we would administer these things to children, given that it's going to shorten the lives of many of them. Yet we're doing it. So my point is, nothing that can't explain that is worth talking about.